Each year as the holiday season approaches, I get contacted by at least a few middle and high school band students and their parents asking about gift giving ideas. So I thought it might be an appropriate time to put together a short video highlighting some of the accessories that could be of great help to students who are pursuing their love of music as a part of a middle or high school band program. So all of the items that I'll be mentioning in this presentation will have links included below in the description if you're interested in checking them out specifically. So I'd like to begin with what I consider the single most important accessory for any musician, and that is a good working music stand. It's virtually impossible for a musician to practice effectively with good posture and good technique without a music stand that supports their printed sheet music. Now, I'd like to begin by also recommending a style of music stand to be avoided. Again, this is a type that I generally recommend students not purchase, and that is the standard, very commonly seen wire music stand. And the main reason why I typically do not recommend this type of stand is simply because it does not allow the musician to make marks on the music while the sheet music is sitting on the stand. Obviously, because there is no support from the back, if you try to write on anything that's sitting on this type of stand, the pencil typically flies right through the paper and destroys the music in the process. Now, if you happen to already have one of these stands, as I know many students do, please don't just throw it away. What I've seen a lot of people do, and I've done this myself, is to simply get a piece of clear acrylic or lucite or something comparable that's approximately the same size as the shelf of the stand, and simply rest that on the stand and then place the sheet music in front of it. That way you have a supportive back that allows the player to make the appropriate marks on the sheet music without destroying it in the process. So it's certainly a lot cheaper to get a hold of something like that than it is to abandon the stand you already have and start over from scratch. So again, check the description below for a recommendation of such an item. So if you happen to be in the market for a new music stand, again, I would recommend something that has a solid backing to avoid the problem of music being damaged while marks are being made on it. One option that's available is the standard Manhasset stand, which is probably the same music stand that's sitting in your school band room right now or something very close to it. This is a great option if you have a permanent place to keep your music stand set up all the time. It does not fold, it does not break down into multiple parts. But it's very, very sturdy and will last pretty much forever in most environments, which is why schools prefer stands of this nature. If you're looking for something a little more portable or something that can be put away when it's not in use, I have had great luck with this stand produced by the Vekkia company. It is made of very solid metal, though it doesn't weigh too much. And it breaks down into smaller pieces and is able to be transported or put away. I use this all the time as I'm traveling to rehearsals and performances with various groups that I play with. The fact that it's metal and all of the adjustment points are made of metal makes it quite durable, and I've had very good luck with it. Again, both of these options have a solid back, which is the most important thing, and there are many, many other options available that are worth considering. But again, look for a stand that has a solid back to it that allows for markings to be made by the musician during the practice process. And the next accessory that I always recommend for all musicians that's often quickly overlooked is a good quality instrument stand. Now, if you're not familiar with what I mean, I'm talking about a stand that is designed to actually hold and support an instrument when it's completely assembled, but not being held directly by the player. Instruments are very delicate mechanisms, and I think very often students do not fully appreciate how easily they can be damaged. So having a good quality stand to support the instrument safely when it's not being held by the player and not in the case, to me, is an absolute necessity. As a multi-instrumentalist, I have to manage many different instruments. I'm often switching from one instrument to another, and that's another reason why instrument stands have always been a big part of the experience for me in playing music. So there are two companies in particular that I always recommend that have proven themselves to me to create very, very high quality stands that are dependable and reliable and will last pretty much forever. The two companies I'm mentioning are Hercules, which is especially noted for their woodwind instrument stands, as well as a company called K&M Music, which is also known for microphone stands and a bunch of other music hardware. But K&M are especially known for their brass instrument stands. And again, many of the models that both of these companies make can actually be stored safely directly inside the instrument while it's in the instrument case. So in many circumstances, you don't have to haul another item around in addition to the instrument case. Either way, I feel that this is an overlooked accessory that is very, very important, especially when you're investing so much money in a musical instrument. It seems out of place to neglect taking care of that with a stand that can support it and can easily help you avoid unnecessary repair costs along the way. And speaking of damage to musical instruments, I bet you didn't know that the number one location where instruments are damaged is actually in the case that the instrument is being stored in. The reason why instruments are so frequently damaged in the case is because the case, unfortunately, does not fit the instrument properly. If the case is too tight, it can result in keys that are bent and parts that are pushed out of alignment. And if the case is too large, and this is one of the most common problems we see, the instrument is allowed to move around inside the case, which can cause its own separate type of damage as the instrument is banging around while being transported in the case. So the next recommendation that I would make is to consider taking a very close look at the case that your instrument is stored in. Check not only the outside of the case, but especially the inside of the case. Give your instrument a little bit of a wiggle as it's laying inside the case, and if you're able to move it around pretty much at all, it might be an indicator that it's time to replace that case. Now, there are many aftermarket options for instruments, many of which are excellent, some of which do not serve the purpose quite so well. But what I would avoid if you're considering replacing a case is any kind of a case that would be considered more of a bag. I do not recommend something that would have a soft outer shell to it with padding on the outside that allows you to kind of push on it and maneuver it from the outside. Look for something that has a strong, rigid outer shell that will give greater protection. And then the next most important thing is to check to be sure that your instrument fits into this case properly. I always recommend purchasing cases, especially if you're purchasing online when you don't have the chance to test your instrument's fit in advance. Be sure that you check the return policy of any vendors when it comes to case purchases, because if you get the case and find that your instrument does not fit into it properly, then you definitely want to have the opportunity to return it. Some cases offer a lot of extra bells and whistles with pockets on the outside for extra storage that are very nice. But the most important part is that your instrument fits into the case properly. So I always encourage students to check very carefully to see how much movement there is of their instrument inside their case, and then to consider the possibility of a change if the need is there. So at this point, I'm going to shift my focus to the reed instruments in the band. So for you brass players, percussion players, and flute players, I thank you for watching, but you're probably okay to sign off at this point. So we all know the woodwinds in the band setting have the hardest job of all, because we are continuously having to deal with reeds. And as you already know, if you're an experienced woodwind player, reeds are the bane of a woodwind player's existence. And we are constantly trying to address the issues that reeds present. We work as hard as we can to be consistent in the sound that we're producing and the responsiveness of our instruments, but reeds are constantly changing and working against us. So I wanted to mention briefly the idea of taking a close look at your reed and mouthpiece setup. I'm not going to go so far as to recommend particular mouthpieces or reed brands or models, but if you're still playing on the same mouthpiece and reed combination that you started on as a beginner, especially if you're a high school student, it's probably time to consider an upgrade that could really increase the quality of the sound that you're able to produce on your instrument. Generally speaking, the rule is that the closer to the mouth any part of a musical instrument is, the more critical its effect on the overall sound. So since the mouthpiece and the reed are where the tone begin, it makes sense that they're going to have a bigger impact than anything else. So a lot of times I've had students and parents come to me about the purchasing of new instruments, asking questions about new instruments. And I always recommend considering a reed and or a mouthpiece upgrade first before changing and investing in a brand new instrument. Because very often that change alone can make a huge difference. So I'm simply going to recommend that you speak to your band director about possible options for upgrades, and you can always contact me directly if you have specific questions, especially those that are related to the saxophone or clarinet department, since that's where most of my performance experience revolves. So since we're on the topic of reeds anyway, it seems like a natural place to mention the idea of reed storage. First and foremost, please be sure that you are not storing your reed on the mouthpiece when you put the instrument away in the case. It is generally a poor habit that leads to reeds not lasting very long, and there are also hygienic concerns about things that grow on the reeds due to moisture that gets trapped inside the mouthpiece. So I always recommend removing the reed from the mouthpiece when you put the instrument away. Now, what you do with that reed is also very important. I never recommend storing the reeds back in the original plastic housing that it comes in when you purchase a box of reeds. They work great for protecting the reed before it's being played on, but once it's been played, they are not going to offer the type of protection that the reed requires as the moisture level changes as it gets wet and then dries out, and that cycle repeats itself. I recommend these very simple reed cases from DAddario. They are very, very inexpensive. They come in a variety of different colors. Each one holds 4 reeds, 2 on each side, and it very securely protects the tip of the reed, allowing the entire reed to dry flat, and it keeps them in really good shape so that when you pull them out to use the next time, they're in as good a shape as they were the previous time that you used them. The other thing that these reed cases promote is the rotation of reeds. If you look carefully, you can see that these cases also have a number marked on each of them, numbered 1, 2, 3, and 4, and that promotes the importance of rotating reeds each time you play. Please do not use a single reed continuously until it breaks or wears out, because then you have to start over with a brand new reed and you don't have any extras that are already broken in. If you should break your only decent reed the day before a concert, then you're in bad shape because you typically do not want to be using a brand new reed in a performance. So breaking in a series of reeds by rotating through them and using a different one every day on a cycle allows you to work new reeds into that rotation without having to worry about having to use a brand new reed in a critically important moment. So I always recommend these. I have so many of these reed cases I don't even know, I can't even keep track anymore. I use them. I use the color coordination because they come in so many different colors to separate different strengths of reeds. As a saxophone player, I use a different mouthpiece in my classical playing than that which I use in my jazz playing. And I also end up using different types of reeds on those mouthpieces. So I might have a blue case for my 2.5s that I keep in my alto sax case. I might have a red one that I use for my 3-strength reeds in that same case. The possibilities are endless, but it's very important that you maintain your reeds in some kind of a case that is designed for that purpose. They will last longer. They will save you money in having to purchase more reeds when you don't really need to, and it will keep them in the best possible playing condition for as long as possible. The last accessory that I'm going to talk briefly about that is especially important for woodwind instruments are swabs. And as I alluded to during the reed conversation, moisture is a key enemy to woodwind instruments. And using a swab is going to help fight that battle to get the excess moisture out of the inside of these instruments before they get put away. Pads on woodwind instruments are especially susceptible to moisture, and if the moisture is allowed to remain on those pads after the instrument is put away, especially if it's sealed up in a case, that moisture begins to rot and deteriorate that pad material, causing eventually small leaks that make the instrument harder to play. So one of the ways that we can counteract the effects of moisture is by using swabs on a consistent basis and running them through the tubing of our instruments at the end of each playing session. Now, I recommend BG swabs. There are many different companies that make swabs that are all fantastic, I'm sure, but I have personal experience with the company called BG, and I would recommend those because of my experience with them. It's very important that if you're getting into the idea of swabbing your instrument for the first time, that when you purchase a swab, be sure that it is appropriate in size for your particular instrument. An alto saxophone body swab is not the same size as a tenor saxophone body swab, and it's also worth noting that in some cases, especially for saxophone players, you can't use the same swab for all the different components of the instrument. You may have to use a different swab for the neck and the mouthpiece versus what you would use through the body of the instrument. If you try to use the wrong swab, it could either be ineffective if it's too small, or if it's too large, there's obviously the danger of it getting stuck inside the tube, and then you have a serious problem. So always pay close attention to the size of the swab and pay attention to what size of instrument it is designed to use. Again, swabs are terrific for fighting moisture buildup on the inside of woodwind instruments. Now, some of you may have encountered a product that looks like this one, commonly referred to as a pad saver, or I've also heard it referred to as a shove-it. This is an item that is often sold and marketed toward woodwind players, flute, clarinet, saxophone players in particular. I am not a fan of this particular product, and I say that from my own personal experience from having used it for a number of years when I was younger. The problem with this device is that it does soak up the moisture from the inside walls of a woodwind instrument tube, but more often than not, it simply ends up getting left inside the instrument, which defeats the purpose of what you're trying to accomplish with it. So if you were to use something like this, I would recommend taking it out of the instrument when you're done and storing it someplace else. That usually doesn't happen, though, because the most convenient place to keep it is inside the instrument, which again defeats the purpose of trying to get the moisture out. So I always recommend a swab with some kind of a string or a pull-through instead of this, because swabs are so easily stored. You can wrap them up, store them in a little pocket in the instrument case, and it's always there. This thing just leaves the moisture inside the instrument, the pad saver or the shove-it I'm talking about. So I would recommend avoiding the pad saver that you see on screen right now and sticking with a more traditional swab, again, to get that moisture out of the instrument. I'd like to thank you for taking a few moments to check out this video. I hope you found it a little bit helpful at least, and if there's anything that I can do for you or you have any questions about anything that we've talked about here, feel free to check out the description where I'll post my email down there. Shoot me an email and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Thanks very much. Have a great day.